Hello there. This is Oporantsis, and welcome to another episode of Let's Discuss. In today's episode, I will be discussing an interesting topic because even though the broader concept of Star Wars deleted scenes has been done to death and countless YouTube channels have covered almost all of the popular and well-known deleted scenes from the DVD discs, there are still many more that have been completely neglected and that most people appear to have not researched or know very limited information about. Most Star Wars fans across the internet seem to remain completely unaware of most of these scenes' existence, and for good reason. The majority of these scenes we will cover today are either very limited in the amount of footage we have of them, or downright only shown to us through set photos or actors, crew members confirming that they were in fact filmed. So without further ado, let's hop into them, as I'm sure you're unaware of at least one of the scenes I will cover today. Now to start off this video, I wanted to talk about a bit of an alternate take on what we actually got in The Phantom Menace. In The Phantom Menace, you might recall, right before the pod race, there is a scene where they're in this very large garage with all of the pod racers. And Qui-Gon Jinn, masterfully, wonderfully played by Liam Neeson, of course, is talking with Watto. Of course, the digital character, the Toydarian, voiced by Andy Secombe. But what I wanted to discuss is a bit of an alternate take on this scene, because apparently there was some different dialogue for both Qui-Gon and for Watto. They were supposed originally to say a few different lines, which did not end up in the final cut, with them instead talking about the dice and the chance cube. But originally they weren't supposed to talk about the chance cube, or maybe at the very least there was something before that point, which they discussed, which got sliced for the audience. Here is how the final movie version goes.
I'll wager my new racing pod against, say, the boy and his mother.
No pod is worth 2 slaves, not by a long shot.
The boy then.
Well, we'll let the fate decide, huh?
While here is the alternate version, and what he originally was supposed to say, and his initial reaction.
I'll wager my new racing pod against, say, the boy and his mother.
A pod for slaves? Well, perhaps, just one. The mother, maybe. The boy isn't for sale.
He's just a small boy. He can't be worth that much.
No.
For the fastest racing pod ever built.
No.
Now, what is my main takeaway from this scene? In this version, Watto was a much smarter gambler, because in The Phantom Menace in the final cut, you can see that, as Watto says himself, Qui-Gon Jinn swindled him, and he tricked him, and Watto was very gullible, he was so greedy that whenever Qui-Gon was betting on a new thing, Watto was immediately agreeing. But in this alternate version, what really struck me was that Watto was very protective of Anakin, and did not want to encourage this bet. He did not want to bet Anakin, because he, I guess, had more respect for Qui-Gon Jinn here, and actually did not want to go this far. He wanted to ensure that there was no chance that he would lose Anakin. You could hear he was saying like, no. But in the final cut, he does agree, and he agrees because of the chance cube. Secondly, I want to discuss Darth Maul. You might recall, of course, the scene where Darth Maul sends out his probes, and then in one deleted scene, which we're not really going to discuss because this is one of the more popular ones, but you might recall if you saw that scene that Qui-Gon Jinn and Anakin notice that probe, and then they start running away, and then Darth Maul flies on his speeder and catches up to them, and then there's a big duel between Qui-Gon Jinn and Darth Maul, very well choreographed in the desert, very exciting, and then Qui-Gon Jinn jumps onto the ship, and they fly away, and Darth Maul stands there knowing he has been defeated, or at least that's what you thought, because you were all deceived. You were all tricked. You were all completely taken advantage of by the editors. They completely cut out a major part of this scene, and I think they did it masterfully. I don't expect anyone to notice. I never noticed, because the way they cut it was perfection. But originally, after Qui-Gon Jinn jumps onto the bridge of the ship, instead of Darth Maul standing there like he did in the final cut, Darth Maul was originally supposed to actually jump onto the bridge with Qui-Gon. They continued their duel for a few seconds on there, and then Qui-Gon knocks him off, and that's when he lands on the sand, and then he stands up, and then we cut back to how it was in the actual final version. I want to go on to the extended scenes of the Senate meeting in The Phantom Menace, because according to actor Jerome Blake, who played Senator Horrocks Ryder, Orn Free Taa, and Mace Amida, and also my favorite character Oppo Rancisis, but that doesn't matter here. An entire 5 minutes of the Senate scene were cut. And luckily for us, some of that amazing stuff has been publicly disclosed. To start off, I want you to take a look at this extended scene of Senator Palpatine and Queen Amidala entering the Senate chamber.
I wish I had your confidence in this tactic, Senator.
We must force a new election for Supreme Chancellor.
Now, I wish to remind you that this is brand new, because in the movie scene, it starts with them already being in their Senate pod. So them entering, that's completely new. We don't see this footage in the film. Getting Ian McDiarmid as Palpatine, it's always a treat. So I'm very happy. Secondly, even though there is no footage of this, we know for a fact that a red protocol droid called TC-4, as well as another red protocol droid called TC-3, were both cut from the final version of The Phantom Menace. We have photos of both these droids, and the Wikipedia article confirms that in the Senate scenes, this droid was meant to appear with Senator for the Swokus species, as well as with Senator Palpatine, but in the final cut, well, sadly, no droids there. Pascal Argente, my second favorite character in Star Wars after Palpatine and before Oppo Rancisis. Yes, him. That's no joke, no joking. He is my second favorite character, Pascal Argente. Was apparently meant to appear in The Phantom Menace, in the Senate scene as well. Based on the official game cards, we can see photos of him from the set in a brand new costume, unlike his Attack of the Clones or Revenge of the Sith costume. But the final cut does not include any of him, and his actor in The Phantom Menace is not even credited, which is unfortunate, as having him be in the Senate would tie in with the Separatist story in the second and third film. I think that would be a nice touch. Now, another very interesting part of the Senate scene, much of which got cut in The Phantom Menace, is that originally Bib Fortuna, yes, the Bib Fortuna, Jabba's servant, Jabba's major domo, was meant to be a senator in the Senate. We know that based on the fact that Alan Rusko, the guy who played Plo Koon and Dolce Dufine, was actually put in makeup and portrayed Bib Fortuna for these scenes. But he was left on the cutting room floor. Bib Fortuna did appear in the end in The Phantom Menace, but he was played by Matthew Wood, not Alan Rusko. And he was with Jabba at the pod race instead of being a senator in the Senate, like he was meant to be in this deleted scene. Now that makes much more sense canonically, as, you know, him being a senator makes me wonder how Bib managed to, scoop that low to work for Jabba the Hutt eventually. But it is a shame that Alan's scenes were cut. To make matters even more intriguing, Bib represented the Twi'lek species along with Orn Free Taa. So yes, in the original cut, not only was Orn Free Taa with Bib, but he also had a protocol droid with him. None of that made it into the film, because Orn Free Taa was in the Senate scene, but he instead had 2 human aides, suggesting that this was either edited in post-production or completely reshot. But now that you understand that Orn Free Taa originally had Bib Fortuna with him, as well as a protocol droid, to make your brain explode a bit more, this alternative version we ended up seeing with the human aides instead of Bib Fortuna and instead of the protocol droid ended up being changed again in the 3D re-release. Because in the 3D re-release, Orn Free Taa's Twi'lek aides from the following 2 films were digitally inserted. According to an interview with Jerome Blake, once again aka Oppo Rancisis, Mace Amida, Horrocks Ryder, all those other characters, Mace Amida was originally supposed to have way more dialogue in The Phantom Menace. In fact, when he shouts order in Attack of the Clones, that's actually stuff that they didn't use from the Phantom Menace cut.
Order, we shall have order in Attack of the Clones. That was an outtake from Phantom Menace.
Oh, I see.
Because the Galactic Senate scene on Phantom Menace on the page was actually about 5 minutes long.
Jerome also mentioned that Terrence Stamp, Valorum, had way more to do with an entire conversation between Valorum and Mace being cut, as well as an entire conversation between Mace and Bail Antilles being cut.
There was dialogue between much more dialogue between me and Chancellor Valorum, Terence Stamp. I'm trying to think. There were other senators present. Bail Organa from Alderaan was in the room, and there was a conversation between Masamida and him.
Really?
Which didn't make it to the screen.
Now I want to return to Darth Maul for just a bit, because the character might have had more lines. There is a scene with Maul we know for sure was cut. In fact, we have video evidence of it. In this scene, Maul speaks, although his voice in the clip we have is still Ray Park, and we don't know if Peter dubbed over this scene or if it was cut before the ADR process even started. Here, take a look.
I feel there's more to this, my master. The two Jedi may be using the Queen for their own purpose.
To me at least, this is a very interesting scene. Maul saying, "I feel there's more to this, my master. The two Jedi may be using the Queen for their own purposes," makes me think that Maul may have had a bit of a belief that the Sith were in the right, as he seems to think the Jedi may be deceiving the Queen, implying he is suspicious of them. Whereas in the final cut, it's very clear that Darth Maul knows he's the bad guy, and he's acting for his own self-gain. Probably not being manipulated that much. Now we have reached the next segment and are about to start discussing Attack of the Clones. One of the short, brief Attack of the Clones trailers back in the day that I found over on Twitter actually showed additional dialogue between Anakin Skywalker and his master Obi-Wan Kenobi. Because basically during the scene where Obi-Wan says, this weapon is your life, Anakin in this other version and Obi-Wan have more to say. Here, take a look.
I've heard this lesson before.
You haven't learned anything, Anakin.
I've heard this lesson before.
You haven't learned anything, Anakin.
Now this is interesting, but it's also quite sad because Obi-Wan is criticizing Anakin so harshly, but he's also pretty funny in here, what can I say? What has to be addressed now are the number of different extended and completely cut scenes from the Lars homestead with the Lars family. Most importantly, in the original version, C-3PO was supposed to remain in the form of a puppet, kind of exoskeleton like he was in The Phantom Menace, until Padmé would give him his signature plating. The scenes were all shot, and Anthony Daniels actually puppeteered C-3PO for them, until the choice to reshoot them with 3PO being the way he is from the start was made. So that's why in the final cut, he's not a puppet, he's not an exoskeleton like in The Phantom Menace, he has his silver plating from the beginning. This was not the case originally.
And Natalie is coming towards me, lining up the fridge magnets that were round my head, because suddenly it went... And suddenly 3PO was complete. And in comes Beru and all that kind of thing, and everyone was so happy for 3PO because he was himself at last. And then George looked at the footage.
In addition, there was a final scene with Padmé, Anakin, Klieg, Beru, and Owen, in which the Lars family waved and bid the Skywalkers farewell. This is one scene I feel is terribly missing from the final cut, terribly missing, as I always found it weird how, in order to keep the pace going, Attack of the Clones just cut from R2 coming to them suddenly leaving the planet with 3PO. It always made it seem like they didn't care about the Lars family, and what more, that they just kidnapped their droid. So it's unfortunate that this was cut, as this would have showed that they gave 3PO away and they were waving goodbye, but not there. Makes me think that C-3PO was kidnapped. That's quite a hostage crisis, if I say so myself. Next, we will discuss a scene which has actually gotta be one of my favorites in the whole film, but sadly a very underrated one that barely anyone remembers and no one really cares about. The scene in which Palpatine and Masamida, as well as Bail Organa, Askak, Jar Jar, and Yoda converse and come to a conclusion to grant the Chancellor emergency powers. Now I know this scene very well. I've rewatched it dozens of times, screen recorded it, did an impression of it as a voice acting demo, and lots of other stuff. So I know this scene very, very well. It's a very underrated one though. And I know for a fact what is a part of it and what isn't. And when I looked at the Attack of the Clones trailer, I was shocked to see this.
We must stop them before they're ready. We must stop them before they're ready.
This is a part of the scene with visual effects obviously fully applied, yet not something we see in the movie. At no point during this scene does Bail Organa speak with Palpatine. Here, let me show you. The only interaction Bail has is with Ask Ak, and then Palpatine starts speaking with Amida for the rest of the scene. This being cut is also deeply upsetting to me, as Jimmy Smits got a total of 3 lines in the whole film.
You really think that's a wise decision under these stressful times? Unfortunately, the debate is not over. The Senate will never approve the use of clones before the Separatist attack.
Meaning he might have had more if this was left in. Palpatine being there also makes me think it could have given more screen time to him, which for me is always a delight. The Separatist Council is the next one I shall talk about, because the amount that was cut from this scene has gotta be illegal and criminal at the very least. I will not complain about what we got. We got a good look at Dooku, all the needed information, Newt Gunray, Sandhill, Shumai, Wat Tambor. What more could we possibly ask for? What more? Well, we could ask for Tunbaktura, who was filmed at this table, but was cut because, according to George Lucas, the mask wasn't expressive enough and was then replaced with Rogo Wadrada. We could ask for close-ups of my second favorite Star Wars character, Basil Argenti, which we can see here were filmed. We could ask for Pacel to actually have some lines so that we could hear his voice, which he definitely did. That's confirmed by both the script and the comic book. We could ask for Dooku's extended speech in which he gets many, many more lines. I think that's what we could ask for. Anakin and Padmé arrive on Geonosis. In the theatrical cut, this is how the conversation goes.
Maybe I can find a diplomatic solution to this mess.
Don't worry. I've given up trying to argue with you.
So you see, very simply, Padmé says her stuff, Anakin says he learned not to argue with her, and they leave. This is not the case in the original version. From what is called the blooper reel, yes, from the bloopers, we can see an alternative version, which is confirmed by the film's legitimate script.
Where are you going?
To find Obi-Wan.
No, you're not.
Let go of me.
Though the epic fail makes it tough to understand what happens, I shall clarify. Padmé wants to leave, Anakin grabs her hand, Padmé says, "Let go of me." Not much to ask, but a unique variation from what we got. Okay, now we've reached a long one. Since this scene has become more and more popular, and most YouTubers have already covered it, I will kind of skim through it and not go into much detail, but in short, the Patronaki Arena sequence on Geonosis was originally meant to be even longer. What main things were cut? Jango Fett's death was going to be much more detailed, graphic, and brutal, with Mace striking at many other parts of his armor with his saber. Ki-Adi-Mundi, Plo Koon, and most of the other Jedi lead an attack onto a Separatist bridge, similar to the Phantom Menace, where we see more Neimoidians. They try to take down the droids by pressing the deactivate button, but learn that the droids now operate manually. What does this scene bring to the table? More lines for Silas Carson, who I think is criminally underrated.
They're independent of the control system.
More screen time for the Jedi, and a brand new Neimoidian character. I think this is an absolute win. But that's gotta be all that was cut from Geonosis, right? Right? No, absolutely not right. Because the main Geonosian battle after the heroes escaped the Patronaki Arena included many more significant details. More scenes with the dwarf spider droids, a scene with Geonosian warriors directly attacking the clones, and clones shooting them directly out of the sky, which was later included in the Clone Wars. And most importantly, these tanks, which ended up not being an Attack of the Clones at all, instead only appearing in Revenge of the Sith. In fact, these rough animatics made for the film show some of my favorite parts of the battle, and I think it's a real shame they were never added in. Actually, this is a great opportunity to self-promote myself, as all the way back in 2018, I made a great video comparing the second Battle of Geonosis in the Clone Wars with Attack of the Clones Battle of Geonosis and this rough animatic here. Check it out to see the similarities. Now on to Revenge of the Sith. The original opening segment, with the characters rescuing Palpatine from the Invisible Hand, was, according to some sources, around 40 or more minutes long, until it was extremely condensed in the final cut. Even though we have very few pieces of the puzzle available to us, apart from major ones, such as, the Shaak Ti death scene, we do have enough to get a thorough enough idea of what was cut from that Battle of Coruscant. Firstly, Count Dooku, played by Christopher Lee, said an additional line during the duel, which was not in the film, but was included in the official game adaptation.
Just because there are two of you, do not assume you have the advantage.
I don't think it adds too much, and the way the camera moved so quickly and kind of rough. It's slightly jarring, it made me a little dizzy compared to the next shot, but Christopher Lee is definitely in my top 10 favorite actors, so seeing more from him is never a shame. Based on some behind-the-scenes footage of the Nemodian captain Lutros Dauphine's mask, and it kind of being tested that the animatronics were synced with the actor's voice, we can see that Lutros was originally going to have an additional line during the space battle.
The ship is breaking up! The ship is breaking up!
This line was not one of the several that Lutros ended up saying in the film.
2 Jedi have landed in the main hangar bay. We're tracking them. Reverse stabilizers. Magnetize! Magnetize! All batteries fire! Fire!
Furthermore, in the behind-the-scenes documentary showcasing the stunts for Revenge of the Sith, as well as a lesser-known full deleted scene, we can see more footage of Palpatine, Obi-Wan, and Anakin escaping from the Invisible Hand ship. This footage includes a great many details, but some of the key moments I'd like to comment on are the battle droids being sucked out of this airlock and helping each other, more of the ship turning upside down with Lutros Define, the Jedi deflecting blaster bolts and climbing upside down as they try to navigate through the cruiser, Palpatine almost falling to his death as a bridge collapses under him but being saved by the Jedi.
Well, none of these ships are gonna get us anywhere. I agree.
Where's R2? Oh great, more droids. That's all we need.
What are we going to do? I don't know. Oh, don't look at me. We have to find an escape pod. Chancellor, attach it to your waist. R2, where are you? R2, get over here. Open this door. That was close.
After the Jedi and the Chancellor return to Coruscant, we can observe several released images of deleted scenes that feature extremely unique stuff. One of them features Palpatine talking to Anakin, presumably further manipulating him, with Mas Amedda walking behind them. What's interesting to note is that Mas Amedda is wearing his black helmet here, which suggests this might be taking place after the opera scene, as in the opera scene, he is not wearing any such headpiece, and its first appearance is in Palpatine's Empire speech. Secondly, we have a photo of Palpatine, Amedda, and the Royal Red Guards sitting in a bus, similar to the one they arrive in to the Senate. In the official cut, Amedda and the Red Guards are not present when he arrives, meaning this might have been them meeting him afterwards. There is also a photo of Amedda leading the Red Guards, which is something I'd especially like to see, as I think Amedda is pretty much the unsung villain of the prequels, and a criminally underrated antagonist. The Red Guards also barely appeared in the film, with only 2 being seen, so having a whole squad of them would have been pretty fun. One other scene from Revenge of the Sith that I came across while already almost in the editing stages of this video, so I'm adding this in now, I wasn't aware of this before, and I'm happy that I discovered it, is this scene in which Captain Typho, of course played wonderfully by Jay Lagaya, or however you pronounce his name and surname, escorts Padmé Amidala into her room before she is about to begin a meeting or do something. I'm not sure where exactly this is placed in the timeline, but some sources claim this comes before the other, better-known deleted scenes, which is, of course, the rebellion forming and Senator Organa and Senator Mon Mothma and all the senators, the Loyalist Committee meeting together, and that this comes straight before it, and that's when she gets brought to that meeting to her apartment, and that this is the captain escorting her, and we can see several handmaidens with her, which I also think was missing from Revenge of the Sith. And Captain Typho was very underutilized in Revenge of the Sith, in my opinion, because he only appeared in the Senate pod during the Emperor's speech proclaiming the Galactic Emperor, and then when he was escorting Padmé, and then she said, oh, no need, before she was flying to Mustafar. So I think he was very underused in Revenge of the Sith. In fact, this is one place where I will give credit to LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, because even though it added something ridiculous by having Captain Typho be present during Palpatine and Yoda's duel, it also made Jay Lagaya have more lines and made Captain Typho more involved in Revenge of the Sith storyline, which I was happy about.
Thank you, Captain.
Rest well, my lady.
But they tend to be black and white, and they tend to be on small monitors that only the director.
When Obi-Wan arrives on Utapau to hunt down Grievous, he is greeted by the Pauan administration. This consists of the main leader, Tion Medon. Tion Medon, what a great name, by the way. What a great name, Tion Medon. Tion Medon. And his accomplices. Here's what the actor who portrayed Lampai Fei in the film, by the name of Goran D. Clout had to say,
"Were there scenes filmed with you that were cut from the final movie?"
Yes, there was. More of an alternate scene as the dialogue managed to survive and was dubbed to the end of the Utapau platform scene. It was a set in a golden room, and I got to see a closer look at Lampay. Some more delicate makeup was needed. The scene was filmed as a pickup.
So that was his quote, and it's actually quite interesting that there was so much extended stuff on Utapau, and even a golden room apparently. I also do regret that Lampay's actor never got the chance to have his part really be seen by the world. The deleted scenes never even being posted, so we didn't even hear him speak really, apart from like that one line. General Grievous's death in the original plan was also significantly different. To prove it, we have this quite famous, actually by this point, but still not too well-known animatic, which was meant to be a plan for how the sequence went. In it, Obi-Wan literally rips General Grievous's heart out, throws it on the floor, and then blasts it with his blaster, the heart, for no reason, pew pew pew, and then he slices him to pieces. Talk about excessively brutal. And before that point, they extended the wheelbag chase to have Grievous actually like kind of roll through civilians on a train and pretty much destroy them and kill them. So that has got to be some crazy action that we never got. Sad, really. Now we get onto the really juicy part of this delicious steak. The completely different version of Palpatine and Mace Windu's lightsaber duel. This alternative duel was very much shot, and the circumstances behind it were quite different. The opening scene of the office duel with Mace Windu, Kit, Stacey, and Agent entering Palpatine's office was very different, as it initially included them confronting the Rodian administrator at Palpatine's desk, as well as fighting his Red Royal Guards. Once they enter, instead of Anakin arriving there later on, like he did in the reshoots, Anakin is standing by Palpatine's side from the very beginning, and even follows the duel closely. This has me extremely interested, and in great anticipation of all the footage hopefully being released someday to give us more context. It is confusing how Anakin was there throughout. How did this change stuff? I don't know. Once Anakin becomes Darth Vader by pledging himself to Sidious's teachings, the evil Sith Lord says the iconic quote,
"Once more the Sith will rule the galaxy. And we shall have peace."
In the actual film, we can see that by this point, the Chancellor has his Sith hood and cloak both fully on as he sits in his chair. However, the behind-the-scenes documentary shows a very different alternate interpretation, in which Palpatine says the exact same line, but wears no robe whatsoever during this part, and remains in his red outfit for the entire duration of the scene.
The Sith will rule the galaxy.
Now, one of the better known, so not so underrated, but completely cut sequences are the alternate Order 66 parts. Now, just to summarize here and not make it too long, we have a longer, more exciting death for Ki-Adi-Mundi with more of the planet Mygeeto scene. We have more Jedi dying on Kashyyyk, including Quinlan Vos. We have a death for Barriss Offee. But worst of all, we got cut an amazing part for Aayla Secura. In the film, she is silent, but in this original animatic that they officially released, she asks,
"Why? Do you think they're droids?"
referring to the clones pulling out their blasters, only for the clones to say,
"No."
Now, what do I regret being cut here so much, you may ask? Good question, and it's actually incredibly simple. I cannot stand that Amy Allen, the amazing Star Wars actress for Aayla, who never got any dialogue or lines to say, could have gotten one line here, and she could have said it if this scene was actually filmed, but she was never given that opportunity. It's ridiculous! Oh, and Mortimer Morrison, if he got to say a few more lines, would have always been a treat.
Steady.
Something is wrong. Stay alert.
In one of the Revenge of the Sith webisodes, when Silas Carson is interviewed in regards to Newt Gunray, we're shown just a glimpse of a scene on Mustafar that we did not actually get. This scene includes Palpatine asking Newt Gunray,
"Have you shut down your droid armies?"
Now, to avoid confusion, the person speaking in this scene as Palpatine, it's not Ian McDiarmid. It's just an on-set stand-in doing the voice for Palpatine. To which Newt Gunray replies,
"We have, my lord."
Now, it is very understandable as to why this was removed, since in the final cut, Palpatine asks Darth Vader to deactivate the droid armies after he already killed all the Separatists, making this scene pretty much redundant, pointless, and confusing. So it's good that it was cut, because it would have created a continuity problem, as this would have shown that the armies were already shut down by Newt Gunray, so why would Vader have to shut them down? But we just got to see Vader shut them down, so that makes sense. Okay, I understand why they cut it. However, is it just me? Or does the stand-in who is doing Palpatine here sound a lot like Tim Curry?
Have you shut down your droid armies? Have you shut down your droid armies?
Such a tragedy. We are in agreement, then? Master Shakti, I trust you've kept this matter extremely confidential.
Have you shut down your droid armies?
What we simply cannot skip over is a scene that was supposed to take place in between when Bail Organa gets a call from Mas Amedda and he invites him to the Emperor's special session of Congress, and the scene where Yoda and Kenobi are about to infiltrate the Jedi Temple and fight some clones along their way. Now, I am not talking about what you're probably thinking about. I am not talking about the imposter Jedi scene with the clones, although I have to admit that scene is hilarious, but it's pretty stupid too. I have mixed feelings about that scene, really. But no. What I am talking about is a scene in which Bail Organa, along with Kenobi and with Yoda, approach the Senate building, and they are met by a blue Senate guard. The blue Senate guard then stops them and wants to arrest the Jedi. However, Obi-Wan Kenobi, reminiscent of A New Hope, which this would be a good parallel with A New Hope, this would be like a very nice connection, because Obi-Wan Kenobi performs a Jedi mind trick on the Blue Senate Guard, and the Blue Senate Guard then lets Organa pass into the Senate and allows the Jedi to go about their business. Now, first of all, this would have been nice connective tissue, once again, with the original trilogy, because it would have showed Obi-Wan actually performing a Jedi mind trick before the original trilogy. It would have been a nice connection with Qui-Gon in The Phantom Menace when he was using the Jedi mind trick. So I think that would have been a nice touch, and also just seeing the Blue Senate Guard would have been really nice and cool, because I think we see very little of the Blue Senate Guards after The Phantom Menace. We see a little of them in Attack of the Clones, and then eventually in Revenge of the Sith we see them, but it's only for like one scene. And I think that evolution from the blue to the red guards is a really nice touch, which I really appreciate about the prequel trilogy. How the costumes slowly evolve and slowly change to be less and less revealing and more closed than like the red guards. So maybe at this point it was like, okay, now we only have the red guards, so the blue forget about them. So maybe that's why they removed them. They didn't want any more blue Senate guards at this point in the timeline. But I don't know, I think it would have been nice to see once again. Based on several other images we have from the set of Revenge of the Sith, we can observe that during the scene where Anakin slaughters the Separatist leaders, he was originally supposed to be shown stabbing Wat Tambor, the Techno-Union leader, through the head. Whether it ended up being considered too violent, didn't work out, or maybe slowed the pace down, I do not know. I really don't know. I can't help with that, unfortunately. But in the end product, we see Tambor hiding behind a table, only for it to cut. And later we cut back to Tambor already being dead, and Anakin confronting Newt Gunray. So we did not see the death, we were supposed to be shown it. This next one I only just learned about very recently, and it is an alternate ending to the Yoda versus Palpatine duel, which was created in animatic form, and which I find very interesting. The biggest things we can interpret from this are the following. In this version, Yoda wins as Palpatine flees the Senate chamber, flying out of the building in his Senate pod. That's actually a little hilarious, you know, him flying away on the Senate pod. Come on, man, the Senate pods are meant to be inside the Senate building. What are you doing? Now, this is not pod racing. It's so uncivilized. Like, come on, Palpatine. I thought you had a little more respect for the Senate, considering you are the Senate. The cam droids are much more involved, filming the entire duel and being used as objects that are thrown during the fight. And I would have loved to see more of the cam droids. Very underrated droids, by the way. After Darth Vader gets his legs completely sliced off, Palpatine, of course, arrives to pick him up. They put him in a medical capsule, get him into the shuttle, and then we have a transition to Padmé. After Padmé, the camera cuts back to Vader being brought to Coruscant, but he is already there, with the shuttle and the two fighters landing near the medical facility to escort him inside. However, based on the trailer, we can see that there was initially a shot of the shuttle and the TIE fighters in space entering the atmosphere before they're flying through the sky. This got cut, presumably not to drag the scene out. The last scene that I wanted to cover for Revenge of the Sith is... Okay, how do I put this? It's very interesting to me, but probably not so much for the rest of you. My reasonings for me liking it so much are, number 1, more of Ian McDiarmid, and number 2, the fact that I spent several years trying to look for it, and I almost gave up. Yes, you heard that right. The scene first appeared in a long documentary about the prequel trilogy, which was posted by the YouTube channel Pop Culture Pandora. I loved that scene as soon as I saw it, and it was ingrained in my memory forever. However, soon the YouTube channel took down that video due to copyright reasons, and since I didn't screen record that scene or anything, it was inaccessible. So I wrote to this channel, Pop Culture Pandora. I was practically begging him to re-release it or send it to me. He said that there is no way he can help me. So I was beyond sure that there would be no way I'd get this scene for the video, and in one last act of desperation, I wrote one more message to Pop Culture Pandora. However, an extreme case of luck occurred on that day, before I even sent him the message. After 4 years of worthless searching, I completely accidentally stumbled on that video, which just made me so insanely happy. It made my day. I was so happy. So what is this scene about, you might ask? Oh, why are you narrating so long? Why are you explaining? Go on. What is the scene about? Okay, well, the footage that we see in it shows us an alternate version of Vader's transformation, where instead of being awake during the whole procedure, during the operation, he's in a kind of coma. The Emperor then says this cut line, "Awaken him." And Vader is lifted up. A very interesting version of the scene, because Vader is obviously asleep in it, but I did like maybe the movie more because we were shown Vader's suffering as he remained conscious for the entire procedure in the cut we got. Now on to the original trilogy. A New Hope, 1977, Alec Guinness, David Prowse. From the footage that we have of David Prowse before he got dubbed over by James Earl Jones as Darth Vader, it's easy to notice that in the scenes where Vader is choking Captain Antilles, Vader actually had quite a few more lines to say, and so did Antilles. Antilles says something along the lines of,
"Only the commander knows that."
While Vader says,
"This ship carries the crest of Alderaan. Was there any of the royal family on board? Who were you carrying?"
During the Death Star conference sequence, two critical things Motti and Tag say just before the movie version of the scene starts got cropped.
"I tell you, he's gone too far. This Sith Lord sent by the Emperor will be our undoing.
The rebellion will continue only as long as those rebels have a sanctuary.
I think the construction of this station has more to do with Governor Tarkin's bid for recognition than any prudent military strategy."
But this is actually unbelievably important, and it's beyond shocking to me that it got sliced, because this is the only time you can fact check me on this, I'm not lying, that the word Sith would have been said in the original trilogy. And with it being cut, the word was not said at all in episodes 4, 5, and 6. Secondly, the word Emperor also very rarely gets brought up in the film, and this would have been one extra mention of it. Foreshadowing Palpatine, of course. When watching the 6-hour-long episodes of the documentary series Light and Magic about the company ILM, which was created by George Lucas, I highly recommend that documentary, by the way. I think Lawrence Kasdan did an excellent job of directing it. What a wonderful documentary. It was amazing. I was practically scouting for extra footage that we might get from the original films. Unfortunately, none was shown except, stay with me here, except for this very, very brief part here. It's really nothing major, but it does include an extended line by Obi-Wan Kenobi. Instead of him saying,
"Mos Eisley Spaceport, you will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy,"
his full line actually was,
"Well, there we are. Mos Eisley Spaceport. You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. Well, there we are. Well, there we are. Well, there we are. Well, there we are. Well, there we are."
Nothing major, but pretty fun, and I'm a big fan of Alec Guinness. What can I say?
I'm ready for anything.
Now we approach the cantina scene, which was considerably different. Firstly, when Ponda Baba gets attacked by Ben Kenobi, the theatrical cut we got shows something very strange, and I was always confused about this. I don't know how fans don't have a bigger issue with this. This is pretty terrible stuff. Despite Kenobi visibly cutting off Baba's arm, the arm that we ultimately see on the floor appears to be human and does not at all resemble the Aqualish species. The simple truth is that there were two official lost cuts of this scene I found, each of which would have made much more sense. The first shows a shot of the hand cut, except for the fact that this time around it actually is Ponda Baba's hand, making me even more confused about what in the world happened in that editing room and how could they mess this up if this was actually shot and we actually had Ponda Baba's arm right there. What happened? Why did they reshoot this with a stupid scene? I don't know, we had a perfect scene there. Why reshoot it? I don't know. The second version of the sequence, also available online, is much more dark and gruesome, showing Ponda Baba's decapitated head on the floor. In regards to the infamous Han and Greedo scene, there were several things that were deleted. First of all, originally Han said an extra line.
I don't think they'd like another killing in here.
Secondly, most of Greedo's scenes were completely reshot. So the scenes that we see in the movie, in A New Hope, that are so beloved by the fan base, they have nothing in common with the original scenes portrayed by Greedo's actor, which were much more close up, they were much more to his face, they had a non-moving lip mask, and very curved fingers that were quite close to the screen.
Then I'll take it now. Jabba would rather have... That is the idea, Solo. Now you come outside with me.
Or must I finish it here? I don't think they'd like another killing in here.
They'd hardly notice. Get up.
After Han shoots the Rodian, there were several more alien reactions we did not get to see. Now, this next one might make you slightly uncomfortable, so fair warning, as this relates to another kiss between Luke and Leia. In A New Hope, Leia gives Luke a friendly kiss on the cheek and wishes him good luck before they swing across the bridge like him rescuing the princess. The shocking fact is that in one of the takes available to us, this kiss appeared, at least to me, to be straight on the lips. This is an interesting variant, but with what we found out about the two later, might have been better off missing, you know. During the duel between Ben Kenobi, played by Sir Alec Guinness, and David Prowse's Darth Vader, Ben originally said this extra line.
You can't win, Darth. If my blade should find its mark, you will cease to exist. And I warn you, if you strike me down... You can't win, Darth. If my blade should find its mark, you will cease to exist. And I warn you.
This was a far more aggressive move by Obi-Wan, so it might not have fit with the peaceful nature he has in the scene. The Empire Strikes Back has only one unknown scene that I am aware of. This is a 1-second shot that appeared in the original trailer. In this shot, we see the Wampa from the perspective of underneath it, like next to his legs, with its legs being shown. While this shot appeared in the original Empire Strikes Back 1980 cut, it only had it shown when Luke already grabbed his lightsaber. However, this short shot from the trailer was from when Luke was still hanging unconscious, making this brand new footage. Likewise, in the Return of the Jedi trailer, we see Palpatine walking with Vader from this distant angle wide shot. The fact of the matter is that this angle is only shown before Vader rises from his knees and walks with Palpatine. So that is brand new footage as well. It's a new shot from that angle.
Of the enemy.
According to actor Michael Carter, now Michael Carter played Bib Fortuna in Return of the Jedi. He wore the makeup for the character. According to this particular actor, Bib Fortuna originally had an extra scene they filmed, which was entirely removed, where Bib was flirting with one of the girls at Jabba's palace, I believe, which maybe was meant to be creepy, maybe was meant to be more romantic, I'm not sure, but Salacious B. Crumb, you know, the little puppet, Jabba's little pet, Kowakian monkey lizard was also kind of, having a little funny attitude there in that scene. So that would have been interesting to see. I don't know. I don't think it would have distracted too much from the main story.
I did see it was eventually cut from the film. There was a party scene and there was a kind of joke with Salacious Crumb, the little puppet. And Bib was meant to be drunk. And they had this very beautiful girl, who had a wig that was half white and half blue. As Bib had picked her up at the party, this was the kind of subtext.
Apparently, during the Battle of Endor, we were supposed to see much, much more of General Medine. General Medine only ended up having one scene. Now, he did have a large monologue, a pretty large monologue, and he had a lot of very close-up screen time, so he definitely not underused, but it would have been nice to see a little more of him, and apparently he was supposed to be one of the generals leading the Battle of Endor campaign, but in the end we only saw Admiral Akbar, which I think was okay anyways, but it would have been nice to see these deleted scenes, in the Blu-ray or something.
A big battle sequence which George Lucas directed with the second unit. It didn't end up in the movie for various reasons, but there are shots of it available on still shots available now to this day.
Okay, busy flying. Background action. Flash! Stagger! Flash! Stagger! Don't stagger until I tell you! Keep flying. Action Akbar. You've got to give those fighters time.
Maybe.
Sorry, The big flash. And a cheer!
And finally, I wanted to mention the scene where apparently Vader takes Luke onto the Death Star. Now, of course, you might be asking, well, what news is that? Of course, in the movie, we see Vader take Luke to the Death Star, but not exactly. Hold on there a minute. Because what we see is the troopers taking him onto the shuttle flying away, and then the next scene is already the Death Star, the Emperor's Tower, and they're exiting the elevator. But from this set photo, which is very legitimate, we can see that originally there was a scene filmed where they exit the shuttle on the Death Star landing platform, and Vader escorts Luke towards the elevator. This was probably cut because it was a little redundant and probably there wasn't much important dialogue, or they replaced it to another scene, or maybe it just didn't work out, but it would have been nice as well. It's pretty interesting. It reminds me a bit of the scene where Vader himself arrives onto the second Death Star, or the Emperor, or even, Vader arriving, which they put into the special edition of The Empire Strikes Back. Now, in conclusion, I feel like I gotta say this. I completely respect George Lucas's decision not to release any footage of most of these scenes and be very silent about them, be very secretive. That's completely his decision. And I myself understand completely a director's desire not to show much additional footage that they're not really satisfied with, because what do they want to show us? They want to show us the final product, the way they envisioned it. And the cut that we got, in my opinion, if that's what George released, and George hasn't spoken about the deleted scenes much in other stuff and he hasn't released them, then that is the director's cut. The director's cut doesn't have to be the long cut with all the scenes. No, the director's cut is referred to as the cut that the director is most satisfied with, what he wants to show his audience. And as far as we know, the movies we got, both for the original trilogy and for especially the prequel trilogy, when the technology was advanced enough and George filmed everything he wanted, I think that we got exactly what he envisioned for the films. And the scenes that he wanted us to see, he released on the discs. However, given how large the fan base is, how loved the prequels are nowadays, and how the originals have always been loved, George should reconsider, and he should consider speaking about these scenes more in interviews and allowing Lucasfilm or Disney, or encouraging them at the very least. I don't know, maybe he wants to, but they aren't doing it. But whoever has the rights, with George Lucas's permission, who should give permission, should release these scenes, because the fans crave them. We are desperate for them. At least I am. I'm very interested to see what else was filmed. I'm very interested to see what more of Ian McDiarmid, especially, playing the parts. I want to see Stephen Boyle, Marty Verrill, Silas Carson, Christopher Trustwell. I want to see what else these amazing, wonderful, talented actors brought to the table that we were not given the opportunity to witness. And I think George should understand how interested the fans are in the product and understand that we really want want this to be released, and we don't want it to be lost forever and to have all been for nothing. And we want to witness what alternate visions for the story there were. And so I truly encourage George Lucas, if by any stretch of the imagination, by miracle, he's listening to this video, if he has some kind of contract with Disney where they can't release this footage, you know, to encourage it to be released, or to encourage for it to be searched for if it still exists out there. I'm sure it exists somewhere. Must be. I'm sure Matthew Wood or Ben Burtt edited the films. I'm sure he has it somewhere. And if they're not allowed to release it, I truly urge George Lucas to reconsider, to allow it to be released, and for Disney to heed the fans' message and to do as we so desperately want, and to release these scenes, because I feel it's very important, and I feel I'm not being intrusive or anything by saying this. I think the fans deserve them. So I would truly, anyone who has watched this video so far, which I truly appreciate, thank you so much. But more importantly, this isn't really even about you watching this video. This is about you seeing the scenes and what we could have gotten, supporting this trend. And so if anyone was to create some kind of hashtag, not necessarily something like release the Lucas cut, because I think that's not exactly what it is, you know, the Lucas cut is what we got, but something like release the unreleased prequel original deleted scenes, something simpler, but something like that. If that hashtag was to trend, and if it was to reach actually an audience, which I think the reason we haven't got these scenes is because no one is interested in that hashtag, but I think if it trended, and if enough people supported it, I think that Disney would pay our attention, and George Lucas would too. So I truly encourage some hashtag like that to be spread, and that is the overall message I want you to get from this. But thank you very much, have a wonderful day, and so long.